This is the Toss-Up, where we take a look at some of the topics facing the world of sports and then we dive deeper. Whether it's your best friend's fantasy team or the future of college athletics, we're just trying to expand the conversation. We just want to take a look at the topics that keep you tuned in to the beautiful world of sports. On the first Sunday in December, college sports fans gather around their televisions to watch the unveiling of the 4 college football playoff teams. What precedes and ensues is weeks of debating whether or not they got it right. Now let's fast forward just over 4 months to Selection Sunday for the men's basketball tournament. Picking 4 teams to craft the championship path can be hard enough. Now imagine a field of 68. Bracketology, which is now a household term for sports fans, is one of the most intriguing concepts surrounding college athletics. How are the teams seeded? What matters in terms of resumes? Every year we wait to find out, and every year the magic of March exceeds expectations. Hi everybody, I'm Michael Dugan. Joining me this week on the panel we have IUS TV reporter Michael Tilka, BTN Student U broadcaster Jack Grossman, and our very own IUS TV co-sports director Austin Matricardi. Gentlemen, Bracketology talk, are we ready?
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
All right, so it's been a field of 68 teams since 2011. 4 play-in games now we have between 16 seeds and 11 seeds. I know there's no perfect system for a postseason in sports, but is this the right system for college basketball?
You know, I think, like you said earlier, it's not a perfect system, but I think it's one that is good, and I think it's one that people definitely enjoy. Now, me personally, I think it's perfectly fine. I understand that there's a lot of logistics and a lot of things that need to be worked out and things like that. But the format right now, crystal clear, perfect.
Is there anything better than the NCAA tournament? Our inner John Rothstein would all say no, but but the NCAA tournament field of 68, maybe if you brought it back to 64 and eliminated the playing games, that'd be all right. But I'm fine with it. It works well just how it is right now. Just the pure chaos that you get from it really makes it unlike any other spectacle in any other playoff format, and that's what makes March Madness so great.
Yeah, I mean, you look at this system, and it's probably one of the best, if not the best systems in all of sports as far as playoffs go, the postseason. You know, people always want to tweak things, especially now with the NBA playoffs recently, but I think that the way that the NCAA does their basketball tournament right now is great. I think that, you know, maybe a few tweaks here and there, but all in all, it's pretty solid.
Now, walk us through the selection process. How does it work and how does the committee go about it?
Well, I mean, you got the automatic qualifiers, which is the 32 conference champions, and then after that, the committee goes through and selects the other 36 teams based on at-large bids, and it's the 36 most qualified teams, what they call it. Now, how do they judge that? They do it by RPI. They do it by just overall record. They have a new system now where they have Q1, Q2 games where it's RPI 1 through 30 for your home game, 1 through 50 if it's a neutral game, and 1 through 75 it's a road game to try to value road games more. And what you're seeing is just more quality wins for teams because they have more opportunities to get them when they're on the road, and it values road games more.
Now, with these analytics becoming a more integral part of the sport, in recent years, has the committee started to value that more?
I think that they have, because, I mean, if we look at just the sports landscape as a whole, analytics have become more and more important in this millennium. So, I mean, it would make sense that the committee would begin to value analytics more, especially with the rise of, you know, things such as KenPom. You know, a lot of people are going to KenPom.com and they're looking for through that data, and they're using that to judge teams. And, you know, it provides a lot of things that you wouldn't necessarily see if you were just watching games. So I think that analytics definitely have their place, and I think that, you know, the committee is valuing them more.
I mean, the RPI is outdated, and that's still what the committee uses right now. So I think you got to eventually, you'll see them, they're starting to realize this, but they haven't done yet. Go to something like KenPom or BPI or Sagarin. There's a lot of statistics out there, and a lot of them are better than RPI. So they gotta update their systems a little bit there. That's probably the biggest problem with the NCAA selection committee, really, is that they still use the RPI.
Absolutely got to agree with that. When I do my game previews for the Crimson Quarry, I use Ken Palm all the time. It is definitely worth a subscription. I know we're not supposed to plug things on the show, but I'm going to do it anyway. Get yourself a Ken Palm subscription. The analytics that they offer are just truly unvalued. And not only the analytics, but the predictions that they offer, the accuracy that Ken Pomeroy offers is one that's just unrivaled.
Now, is Ken Palm, has that been used more recently with the committee's factors into what goes into the seating in the last couple of years?
RPI is still the official way that they do things, but they now allow people to kind of look at Ken Palm and Sagarin, all these different numbers if they want to, but at the end of the day, the RPI is still the king of the advanced statistics right now, even though it's really outdated and not correct, but that's just kind of the way it is, and you see that they're realizing that, and likely in the next few years we'll see that change.
All right, well, we're going to toss it to break real quick, but coming up after the break, our panel will discuss some more bracketology, dive deeper into the history and a little bit into the future, so stick with us. Welcome back to the Toss-Up. We're talking bracketology here, just talked about the committee and how they factor things into seeding. But before we move on, let's toss it to Mary Kate Hamilton for a brief history segment on the tournament. Mary Kate?
Thanks, Michael. Of course, with Selection Sunday nearly upon us, we're all looking ahead to this year's tournament. But before that, I thought I would take you all the way back to March 27th, 1939, the day Selection Sunday was born and the NCAA Tournament was made. That's right, 79 years ago, the University of Oregon defeated the Ohio State University 46-33 to win the first ever NCAA men's basketball tournament. For the first 12 years of the tournament, only 8 teams were invited to compete for the title. But over time, the number eventually grew to the 68-team format currently in place. The popularity of the tournament has grown exponentially from when it was first televised in 1969 to the March Madness frenzy we know today. In 2017, around 70 million NCAA brackets were filled out, with Americans risking an average of $29 per bracket, contributing to the estimated $10.4 billion bet on the tournament last year, according to the American Gaming Association. And as you start to fill out those brackets for this year, here's some historical perspective to keep in mind. UCLA has the most national titles since the tournament's founding with 11. The University of Kentucky is second with 8. The University of North Carolina trails right behind with 6, and of course, our very own Indiana is tied with Duke for 4th place, with 5 national titles each. We'll see if history repeats itself this year. Now back to you guys.
Thanks, Mary Kate. Now, guys, we know there's going to be backlash and angry fans no matter what the committee decides here, those teams on the bubble. What are some of the more notable snubs in the recent history of the tournament? We won't dive too far.
I think the first one that hops into all Indiana fans' minds, at least, is that Kentucky team that's coming off a national championship, and then they get snubbed in the NCAA tournament and end up losing to Robert Morris in the NIT. That's one of the ones that stands out to me.
For me, one of the more recent ones is here at Indiana back in 2015. Yogi Ferrell's senior season, Indiana wins the Big Ten regular season championship outright. They fall in the first round of the Big Ten tournament, but then they get a 5 seed. A lot of people were really confused about that because, they'd had this great season. Sure, they'd had a little bit of a struggle there at the beginning, but they were the Big Ten regular season champion. Doesn't that count for something? It turned out all right for the Hoosiers, though, because, they ended up beating UT Chattanooga and then beating Kentucky in the second round, to make it to the Sweet 16.
Wait, you thought that Kentucky team should have made the tournament?
I mean, they came into the preseason ranked number 1. They still had it. Pretty solid.
That's a very college football mentality. The preseason rankings don't matter. That team had no good wins and absolutely fell apart after New Orleans Noel got hurt. They make the tournament if Noel stays healthy, but unfortunately for them, he didn't. But I look at SMU in 2014 in the AAC. They were ranked in both the coaches poll and the AP poll that year. They were rejected by Bracket Matrix as high as a 7 seed on Selection Sunday, and they missed the field entirely. And part of that was because of strength of schedule and because the American wasn't really viewed as a very good conference. But I don't know how everyone could be that far off on that SMU team that was led by a head coach in Larry Brown, who's a Hall of Famer, and started the next season with basically the same team, 25-0.
If you don't like that Kentucky answer, I do have an alternative. I'll present the 2017 Illinois State Redbirds. They got absolutely,
they got absolutely
snubbed. I mean, they had one of the toughest draws in going into a conference tournament when you have to face the Wichita State Shockers. And when you're in the Missouri Valley Conference, you're only probably getting 1 or 2 spots. And if you don't win that conference tourney, then better luck next year, but absolutely deserved a spot last year.
And the funny thing is, the team that got over, I'm sorry, I'm thinking of another case. I think it was Monmouth in 2016. Syracuse got the bid over them. People were angry.
Yes.
Syracuse with 10 seed went on to go to the Final Four.
Absolutely.
And of course, VCU people were really mad in 2011, the first year in 68 that they got in, and they went to the Final Four.
Yeah.
So.
Gotta love Shaka. Gotta love Shaka.
This is a smooth transition because the next question is, how does the committee determine who gets in? Say you have a mid-major that's around 25-7, a great record but no huge wins, versus an ACC or a Big Ten team that sits just at that 20-win mark. Is it more of a case-by-case thing, or are there trends that seem to be more consistent with who gets the nod over the other?
Well, I mean, it's definitely a case-by-case thing, but for me, I look at who has the team beat. Like, you look at a situation like last year of Illinois State, they probably should have gotten in. And with the strong record, they did have a win over Wichita State, who was a top 10 team at points last year. So I think they probably should have gotten in. The biggest examples, I look at Missouri State from 2006. They are the highest team to never get into the tournament RPI-wise. They were number 21 in the RPI. They beat a top 5 team in Clemson and still didn't get in. That, to me, means a lot more than, say, a Syracuse who got in as a 10 seed in 2016 and to that point was 2-12 against the RPI top 50. It's like, all that's proven to me is that you can lose to good teams. That doesn't mean that you should be able to get into the tournament. Of course, people say, oh, that proved you wrong because they went to the Final Four. It's like, that didn't change their resume before the tournament, but you got to be able to prove that you can beat someone. And a lot of times you'll see a mid-major team be able to do that, whereas they'll end up putting in a high major team just because they played a lot of better teams but lost to a lot of better teams.
Yeah, and I mean, when you really come down to it, when, it's this team gets in or this team gets in, you take the resumes, put them side by side, you're comparing RPI, key wins, key losses, things like that, strength of schedule, and, it really is just, one of those things that you have to look at case by case. I don't really think that there's much of a trend. It's just which team does the committee think is better, and sometimes they're right, sometimes they're wrong. They're human too, and that kind of adds an interesting element to the whole Selection Sunday process because there's that human element in there, and that's really what makes sports interesting as a whole.
All right, gentlemen, it's time for the lightning round. There's one rule: keep your answers at 10 seconds or less. The first question, in your opinion, what is the most important factor when determining a seed in the NCAA tournament?
I think it's got to be conference record overall. How did you fare on the season?
Quality wins. You got to beat someone good to win tournament games, and if you don't do that in the regular season, you shouldn't get in.
Worst losses. If you pick up a bad loss, it can become a stigma. It can drag your resume down as a whole.
What is the most overvalued factor?
I got to say, I'm sorry, Austin, key losses. Sometimes it's just not your night.
Conference record. I think, depending on the strength of the conference, that can waver how good your conference record should be compared to the rest of the league teams in your league.
RPI, I mean, we've already talked about it. It's a little dated. It needs to be replaced with a better system. Ken Palm, things like that. Those are more useful, in my opinion.
One word, just one word to describe the selection process.
All right.
Fair enough. All right.
Like the rest of March, madness.
Human.
Now, okay, that's pretty good too.
I like that.
How important is your team's seed to determine how far they can go in the tournament compared to the matchups that they'll draw in their region in the first round?
I think seeding's always going to be important. I mean, there's obviously a difference between the number 1 seed and the number 16 seed, but there's some regions that you always just want to sort of stick around to. Between the 4 and the 1 seed, I think that's always on most of teams' minds, and obviously the higher you get, the more beneficial it is, but it always doesn't guarantee that you won't get knocked out by, say, a number 13 seed Middle Tennessee State. So as long as you take care of business, the seed really shouldn't matter too terribly much.
The NCAA tournament is all about matchups. If you're not a 1 seed, there's a chance you can lose in the first round. That's just how it is. Is a 1 seed's never lost. In the words of LeVar Ball, never lost. But if you're not a 1 seed, it really doesn't matter what seed you are. It's all about how you match up with the teams in front of you and how you can play against those teams, because that will determine how far you're going to go in the big dance, not a little number next to your name.
Yeah, and I mean, the seeding is, great. It's important. It's how we set up the tournament. And, it's something for fans to beat their chest about for a little bit before the tournament actually gets started. Oh, well, my team is a 1 seed. It's something that you brag about and all that. But, looking at it as a whole, it's not really that important. Matchups are everything, just like Jack said.
I will say one thing, though. A lot of times you'll see the seeding will help out with the matchups, but then you'll also see, for example, Virginia as a 1 seed loses to Michigan State 2 years in a row. Terrible matchup for them, even though Michigan State was a 7 seed one of the years, and I believe a 5 the other year, or Indiana losing as a 1 to Syracuse in 2013. The matchups mean a lot more than what seed you are.
All right, now as we near the end of the discussion, what is everyone's last word on the bracketology process?
Fun.
Chaos.
I think that my last word on this is probably going to have to be, just madness. Like we said, it's just a great system. It's, it's got all of its different intricacies. I think that it's really solid all around, but it's zany, and that's why we like it so much.
I'm with you guys 100%. It's what makes March March. And the process of selecting teams and seeding them wherever they're seated is imperfect. It's human. It's a lot of different things. It's complicated, but at the end of the day, it's what makes the tournament the tournament. It's what makes March March, and it's what creates all the madness. All right, well, that does it for the show this week. Be sure to continue the discussion on our Twitter page at IUSTV Sports and on Facebook at IUSTV Sports. You can always give any suggestions for the show and ask any questions you may have. Toss it up. Find out if we'll catch it. We'll see you next time.